Hello, everyone, and welcome to Writing for Your Life. We will begin our webinar shortly. My name is Brian Elaine, and thank you for joining us today. We've got a two-part presentation. One is on marketing, kind of the basics of marketing for spiritual writers, and the second part of the presentation will go over some of the writer support services that we offer. So thanks again for joining us. I am going to not be able to look at the chat box while I'm presenting, so I may not see questions that you have during the presentation, but certainly at the end of the presentation, I'll answer any of your questions. So let's get going. Let me start the presentation here. As I said, this is a two-part presentation. We're going to talk about marketing for spiritual writers, and then give you a brief introduction to the writer support services that we offer. Before we get started, though, I wanted to mention another webinar series that we have coming up in September. It's called Meet the Agents, and it's for leading agents who work with spiritual writers. These are folks that have presented at some of the writers' conferences that I've done or previous webinar events, and they're all really highly respected people in our industry. So anything that you want to learn about what agents do, how they work, how do you approach them, what are they looking for, all those kinds of things are going to be discussed. And fortunately, all of the agents have agreed to accept any author profile or book proposal or manuscript that you would like to send them. So I'll be collecting those after the event, and there's no guarantee that they will get back to you. Right or wrong, within the industry, that's the norm. That you typically don't get responses from editors and agents unless they're interested in working with you. So, but anyway, this gives you an opportunity to get those in front of them, to get whatever you want to in front of them. So that's September 18th and 19th, or you can view them on a recorded basis anytime before December 1st. Okay, let's dive right into marketing. This presentation is targeted at early stage writers. So you'll notice that some of the things that I recommend may not be what some of your favorite writers do, some of the more experienced folks. And certainly as a person builds their platform and gains followers, they have greater discretion of what they can do. So this is really oriented, as I said, at people that are more in the startup stage. It's also based on my experience. We're working for many different spiritual writers, both experienced and new. The presentation is relatively tactical in nature, so I'm not going to be talking much about strategy in terms of things like what niche should you occupy or how do you approach the market. Also, I just want to say that this is all just my opinions. You know, it's based on my best judgment of what I think makes sense, but everyone's situation is a little bit different. And of course, I am not a writer. I'm a business person. I'm an entrepreneur. I've got more skills in marketing and business than I do in writing. But I've been able to help a number of folks, and I hope I can help you too. Okay, so why does social media matter? First and foremost, it's because your audience is there. When they asked Jesse James why did he rob the bank, he said because that's where the money is. Well, social media is where your audience is, and there's immense reach. Millions of people access Facebook, as an example, every day, and so it's getting tougher and tougher to kind of get your message heard on any social media, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But it's still the best way to do that. Another really important reason is just that publishers care a great deal about an author's platform. Um, I was at a publishing conference a couple of months ago where one of the CEOs of a major Christian publisher said that 15 years ago, all they cared about was the writing, the quality of the writing of a prospective author. He said now they don't even look at the quality of the writing unless the person has a platform. Now, maybe that doesn't apply to every publisher. I'm sure it doesn't, but it certainly is the trend, and it certainly is the case for quite a few publishers. So unless you have a platform, and social media is the number one form of platform, it's really significantly less likely than it used to be that you would get a book deal. Also, social media really is made for content and for branding. Writers produce content, and this is made for you. It allows you to create your own unique brand in terms of messaging and what's your elevator pitch. You can brand yourself in many different ways in terms of images, color selections, tone, area of focus, and allows you to project your authority and credibility in your area of specialization. And it's an amazing way to be found. We won't get into too much detail about Facebook advertising in this presentation, but that is a way that I recommend that people use in order to get themselves known. And it allows a very high degree of targeting in terms of interests, demographics, geographics, and it's also cost effective. You can set it up so that you only pay when someone clicks on one of your ads. So you're not spending money endlessly without any form of metrics or any form of results measurement, which is completely different than the way that marketing used to be in places like magazines and newspapers. Also, discoverability has shifted for books. It used to be that the main way a book was discovered by a consumer was browsing in a bookstore, and now it's more browsing online. Another aspect of social media is that it gives you a direct connection to your audience. There's no longer a gatekeeper. No one else is deciding, other than the consumer, to pay attention or not pay attention to what you have to say. It also gives frequent opportunities for engagement, for relation building, and there's no delay. Whatever you publish on social media, you can get immediate feedback from that. You don't have to wait for another year after your book is published and then find out that there really was a mistake in something that you said, as an example. Social media is also a great testing ground. It allows you to get feedback on your ideas, to try things out. It allows you to experiment with partnerships, and we'll talk about partnerships more later. And it also allows you to target different audiences, different segments of the market. And of course, in today's day and age, if you're not online, you don't exist. So, that's that's something very important for us all to remember. So I talk with a number of fledgling writers, and they are very hesitant to go gung-ho into social media because they think of it as self-promotion. And I've got two things to say about that, two things to recommend to you. The first is that this is not all about you. It's about the ideas that you have that will help people. So what better thing to do than help people? And in fact, that's the only reason why they're going to be interested in what you have to say. In all likelihood, you're not a celebrity. So they really don't care about you personally until they get to know you. But they do care about, or they could care about, how you can help them, what kind of value you could bring to them. So don't think of this as self-promotion. Think of this as how you're helping people. And oh, by the way, if you believe that God is working through you, you know that a lot of us say that we believe in things like the Holy Spirit. Well, guess what? Let it happen. Let God do the talking through you. So I can't emphasize enough that how, I suggest that you not let a concern about self-promotion get in the way. Now, as we'll talk in a moment, you need to do all of this in a relatively modest and humble way, but don't allow your reticence about self-promotion to get in the way of your success and your ability to help people. Okay, publishers used to kind of do it for you, but they've cut staff, they've cut spending. They now focus on fewer authors, and particularly their existing authors who have already proven to them that they can sell books. So it's become like a hits business, like the music industry or like the venture capital industry. The publishers don't always know who is going to be a hit and who isn't. And so they, pardon me, they have to make a bet, and they want to make a bet on people, authors who are most likely to, bring them the best results. I mean, they run a business too, so they have to be very careful about where they spend their very precious ad dollars and then marketing dollars and staff attention. So a publisher will expect you to already have a website, a social media presence with a following. They will generally help you with promotion on your book launch. So again, depending upon the size of the author's fan base, their previous results with book sales, a publisher generally will help an author with book launch promotion for generally it's a few months. So the good news is that doing all the social media stuff really is not that difficult, and it really is not that time consuming. So let me just talk a little bit about some of the folks I've worked with, some of the things that I've learned from working with them. These are just some examples of some of the better known clients that I've worked with. And I want to give you a couple of examples of how social media has been a success. So here's one of my clients. They started with no online presence whatsoever, and 4 years later had over 1.8 million fans on Facebook, over 300,000 followers on Twitter. And oh, by the way, after all this happened, their book sales went up significantly from what they had been before they were on social media, even though the person was already an established author. So how did that happen? The key drivers to it were, of course, the fact that the person had amazing content. Also was the consistency and format selection that we used in terms of projecting that person's content onto social media. It's really important to be consistent from the standpoint of how often you post, when you post, the types of things that you post, It's also really important to select the right formats. And in this presentation, we don't have time to dive into all of that in great detail, but let me just say that the most effective format for social media is what we call a meme. It's an image with a short phrase superimposed over the image. And what that allows you to have happen is that a customer, a consumer, a potential fan will see that and hopefully immediately establish an emotional connection to the image and what the image says. So that form of social media post tends to be shared much more frequently than just a text post or even a video or even just a plain image. And so that's the reason why you see a number of these things all over social media. You want to use them judiciously, but that is the most effective mechanism for having people learn about you and share your material. And as I was mentioning before, in today's world of online, of social media, it really is necessary to advertise. If you don't, most of your fans won't see the things that you post on your page, which is really unfortunate. In the early days of social media, you could develop a fan base organically, but that is largely not the case these days. But again, as I was mentioning before, advertising is not an enormous ordeal. It's something that you can figure out. It's something that you can afford, at least for some periods of time. So it's good news and bad news. It's effective, but it isn't for free. Okay, another example, and I really don't like to. I hesitate to share this because I don't like to come across as bragging or anything, but my business, Writing for Your Life, didn't exist until the spring of 2016. So we had no awareness, no followers, didn't exist. And then by September of 2016, we had 136 paid subscriptions to a webinar series that we launched. So how did that happen? It happened because of social media and because of applying some of the things that I'm talking about to bringing in customers. Okay, so how does social media marketing differ within a spiritual audience as opposed to kind of just general marketing? I've got a few slides about that topic that I'm going to go into in a little bit more detail. One is to not be too commercial. You don't want to be perceived as too splashy or too cheesy or too much in your face, quote unquote. You don't want to overload your posts promoting your book or promoting your speaking events. There are some, I won't name names, but there's one particular relatively popular Christian author who has pretty much given up making social media posts other than, hey, San Antonio, I'm going to be there tomorrow night. Come and pay to see me speak. I'm not saying not to make posts about your events and your books. I mean, you certainly want to do that, but not to the exclusion of the material that people really care about. You want to feed your audience with what they want, which is your nourishing content. You want them to keep coming back, and you want to attract new people based on your content and the nourishment that you provide them, not on constantly trying to sell them. You also want to err on the side of humility and avoid coming across as a know-it-all. Avoid telling others what they should think. Describe what you've experienced and what things mean to you, not projecting that onto someone else. Again, don't be pushy. Don't be sensational or exaggerate things. Don't be afraid to praise other people and say when someone else has done a great job, particularly someone who is, for instance, an author that you admire and look up to. You want to keep it professional and not too personal. So as an example, for many people getting started, they're not sure whether they should have a professional Facebook page or just their personal Facebook page. And I highly suggest that you have both and that you limit your personal page to your friends, and you target your professional page for your fans. And I know early on you may have to kind of span that divide a little bit while you're building your professional page, but your professional page should be focused on whatever your message is, not what you just had to eat or where you've been on vacation or how wonderful your children are, unless those particular things are completely in alignment with your messaging and the area of focus that you have. So if your area of focus is faith and food, then yes, then you want to show pictures of food. Otherwise, don't show pictures of food on your professional page. Same thing with children. Same thing with any other personal topic. Stay professional on your professional page. Now, an important exception is if there's some story that you're trying to tell that relates to a bigger point, then by all means, you have to include some aspect of your personal life. That's perfectly fine. You also have to keep a balance in terms of frequency. You don't want to overwhelm your fans with Facebook posts or Twitter tweets, and not be too noisy. My suggestion is something on the order of 1 or 2 Facebook posts a day and 2 or 3 tweets per day. But again, that's a very general recommendation, and that can be tweaked from person to person. But certainly don't go a month without posting anything. That's the quickest way to lose whatever audience that you've built up. Minimum of once a week, but I think it's better to do posts more often than that. Don't forget to engage kindly, be overly gracious, be overly generous. Don't be too argumentative, and don't be too sensitive. Don't be afraid that someone disagrees with you as long as it's constructive. But if someone's being nasty and you're getting trolled, don't be afraid to delete those comments or block those individuals if necessary. That, in any kind of religious or, spiritual domain, that kind of goes with the territory that, if you're big enough to get known, you're big enough to get criticized. And so don't take that too personally, but don't be afraid to block people and delete things if it's appropriate. Certainly anything that's spam or anything that is profane, don't hesitate, but also don't hesitate to go beyond that. There's also an expectation that a writer is an artist. So you want your presence, whether it's a website, social media, or anywhere else, to be somewhat artistic. So that's got implications on your book cover design. It's got implications on your website design. So think about the branding that you want to have out there, and think about how you can come across with a look and feel that is artistic and professional and consistent with your image. Also try to be balanced, meaning that you don't want to come across as too negative or too positive, unless, for instance, your whole shtick is that you're a cynic. If that's your persona, then that's your persona. But I think that that's not common. Most people don't want to be perceived that way. So it's also okay to express emotions, but certainly just keep them under control. I mentioned partnering before. I am a big proponent in partnering. And who do you partner with? Well, certainly other authors who are similar to you in terms of your writing area, in terms of your career stage. Don't view them as competitors. View them as opportunities for collaboration, in terms of bouncing ideas off each other, in terms of sharing each other's posts. If they've got a fan base, their fan base may be interested in you, and your fan base may be interested in them. And there's room enough for all of us. It's not like a finite space. So also, many authors have gotten a great amount of value out of local writing groups. So if you're not in something like that, with other people in your community or online, then I suggest that. You can also partner with churches, with other organizations, particularly organizations that have some degree of alignment or affinity with the same area that you are working in. Share your content, share their content, co-promote things if necessary, co-author things is another good, way to do that even more deeply. Online interviews is good. So you'll probably notice that at Writing for Your Life, I've done many online interviews with the authors and the publishing professionals who I partner with. And, I try to keep the topics of those interviews consistent with what I perceive to be valuable for a Writing for Your Life audience. But I think that, doing online interviews is a simple, free thing to do that people enjoy watching. And they have to be short. Just post clips from the interview, not an entire interview, generally speaking. And you can also link to each other's websites and blogs. You can also blog for each other. You put guest blogs on your own blog and your own social media. I think that that's a great idea. And just build a reputation of a person who's great to work with. And just like anything else in life, that will benefit you immensely. So I've been telling you all these things that I recommend that you do, but at the end of the day, you really need to be true to who you are. So be yourself. Let your own uniqueness shine through. And one of the things just as a side note, when I first met some of the more well-known spiritual writers who I've worked with, people like Barbara Brown Taylor and Anne Lamott are probably the two examples that come to mind. When you meet them in person, they are just like their books. It's just kind of amazing to me how consistent they are, how much they really do project their persona. Rachel Held Evans is another great example. And so I think that that's just a testament to how well they write and how well they really project themselves on the page. Okay, let me go into kind of another tactical area here, which is recommendations on communication channels. And let me just actually start with the last bullet here. These are generic recommendations. So I always hesitate to make generic recommendations to a broad audience because I know there's always going to be exceptions. And I'll try to talk to some of these exceptions in a moment. But based on what I've seen, what I experienced, these are the things I recommend, generally speaking. Top priority is Facebook. Second priority is a blog on your website. And those kind of go hand in hand. Your website is a necessity. Your blog is a necessity. It's a repository for all of your rich content. It's a place where people can go to find out more about you once they hear of you. But things like Facebook and Twitter are more outward reaching. So no one's going to find your blog and your website unless you can attract them. It used to be back before social media that the main way to do that was through search engine optimization. So everybody was very focused on what keywords they would include in their blog and their website. And that's still not of zero importance, but it's far less important because to gain fans, you really need social media to do that. Once you have fans, then your blog and your website, and most importantly, your email list are very important for your existing fans. But to attract new fans, it's predominantly Facebook and Twitter as the main mechanisms to do that, with some exceptions that I'll mention in a moment. The reason why Amazon is up there as a top priority is because if you have books, you really want to have your author profile on Amazon. It doesn't take much time to do it. It's not very involved. It doesn't cost anything, but you don't want people to go to Amazon and not learn at least a little bit about who you are. You can have your blog projected there. You can have links back to your website, social media. So you don't want to ignore that, even though it's not something that you have to monitor and maintain every day. Now, what are these other things, right? So if you have a lot of video content and you're very charismatic in front of a camera, then you absolutely want YouTube. If you do a lot of interviews, like I was mentioning before, you want to use YouTube for that. If you have a young audience or a very visual messaging that you're trying to project, then things like Instagram or Pinterest, may be more important for you than they are for the average author. If you're in the business arena, then LinkedIn is very important. That's an older networking site before Facebook and Twitter arrived, but it's primarily B2B, and it's primarily for networking within business communities and finding jobs and things like that. Also, I've mentioned podcasts. If your platform is primarily audio as opposed to text or video, then absolutely you want to have a podcast platform. So, as an example, Science Mike or the Liturgist podcast, those were audio podcast platforms that Mike McHargue built before he even wrote his first book. So he's kind of one of the somewhat unique people that didn't start off blogging, didn't start off with social media as his platform. He started with an audio podcast that became very popular. And then he wrote a book. Now, in Mike's case, he came from an advertising industry where he was very familiar with audio and felt very comfortable with the technology and the methodologies associated with that. Again, so you may have special skills or special areas of focus that would drive you to some of these other platforms that I've listed as secondary that may end up being more important for you than they are for a general author population. Okay, so in summary for the marketing part of this conversation, social media is a must-do. It has tremendous value, and it really doesn't cost that much. So don't be intimidated by it in terms of either time or expense or skills. It's doable. But I can't emphasize enough about this whole aspect of consistency. Pardon me. And again, I mean consistency from making regular posts, consistency with your message. Make sure whatever area of focus that you've chosen to be known for, be consistent to that area of focus. If your expertise is in some area of theology, then I would encourage you not to do rants about politics or some other tangential topic unless it's really germane to your area of focus. Now, again, bigger name authors can get away with that much more than someone who's starting out, but I just encourage you to stick to your area of expertise and your area of focus. Now, with things like Charlottesville, that just happened. Almost everyone has had to speak out in some way about that. So that's an exception, I would say. And that's not so much politics as it is humanity and race, although it certainly has bled over into the political realm pretty significantly in this case. Okay, so let me move on to the second part of the presentation, which is to talk about a series of writer support services that Writing for Your Life offers. So I've partnered with several authors and industry professionals to offer a variety of different services that I hope will be useful to people as they go through their journey on spiritual writing. They're divided into three areas: nonfiction, fiction, and marketing. And most of these are services that I don't offer myself. There's a little bit under the marketing that I actually offer myself, but most of these are situations where I partner with people who I have found to be really great people to work with, and great skills at the areas that they focus on themselves. Okay, within the nonfiction area, there's a variety of different types of services that we offer. One is more of a consulting service for people who are just getting started or having trouble finding their writer's voice. We also do different types of book proposal reviews. One is more of a short viability assessment, whereas the other is more of an in-depth book proposal review. So if you've got a book proposal that you want to send to agents and editors, before you send it out, if you'd like to have someone take a look at it, an experienced set of eyes and ears, that's what those services are for. Also, a more in-depth service is memoir analysis. If you've started or written a memoir, we have people on our team who specialize in that area and can give you feedback. Then some of the nuts and bolts and nitty-gritty are things like developmental editing and copy editing and manuscript review. So these are once you're further along. Copy editing and manuscript review are intended for more of the fine tuning once you've already written and reviewed a manuscript and you want kind of a last minute set of eyes and ears to review it before you send it out. Developmental editing is a little bit more early stage than that, where it's more substantive in terms of the assistance that is provided. And then I also have a couple of partners who do ghostwriting. So that's more expensive, as you can imagine, because it involves quite a bit of time on the part of the person who's doing the writing. But if you have a story to tell and you don't have the time to tell it, but it's compelling and you can afford it, then ghostwriting, could be an option for you. Okay, on the fiction side, there aren't quite as many different things that we have there, but we do have a viability assessment. Again, that's kind of a go, no-go type of review just to give you quick and inexpensive feedback, whereas the other services, the manuscript evaluation and manuscript line editing, are a little bit more in-depth types of services. And then finally is the marketing and design services area. So in terms of website and social media, again, those are things that I do. And there are 3 different levels at which I can assist you. One is to do an audit. If you already have a website and social media, I could do a review for you, give you suggestions on what I found. Or if you're just getting started and you need someone to set those things up for you, that's a different service that I can help you with. I've got a number of folks that I've met at some of the in-person writing conferences that we had this past summer who I'm working with in that regard. Or on more of an ongoing basis is ongoing management of your social media and your website, meaning making posts on your behalf and monitoring your social media and your website for you, things like that. So also kind of more in the book producing end of the spectrum are book cover design and book interior design. So in particular, if you're self-publishing, those are a real necessity. And even if you're going through a traditional publisher, you still might want to have someone spend a little bit of time to look at those things for you. We also have a service to do speaking evaluations if you are interested in honing your skills in public speaking. And then, of course, just more general consulting. Now, so who are some of these partners that I've mentioned who I work with for some of these services? This is Sarah Arthur. She is the fiction judge for the Christianity Today Book Awards. When we had one of our writing conferences, Sarah was the top-rated teacher on writing compared to all of the other speakers at the conference. So that's one of the reasons why I partnered with Sarah to provide some of these services. She's herself written quite a few different types of books and over a dozen published books. So Sarah's just a wonderful person. Lynn Kreiderman. Lynn is the former publisher at Zondervan, and he also, before that, was managing editor at Christianity Today. So he's got a wealth of experience, but he got basically tired of the business aspect of all of that and wanted to go back to his roots of really just helping writers. And so that's why he does consulting, coaching, editing, ghostwriting. And of anyone that I've met, through my travels so far within the publishing industry, I think Lynn has the best judgment, the broadest experience, and someone who I trust completely. So he's someone I highly recommend for a variety of different types of services. Jennifer Grant is a newer member of my team, but she's not new to this whole area. She's been an award-winning journalist. She's authored 7 popular Christian life books. She does a variety of different types of consulting and editing, and she just launched a book this summer. She's kind of busy right now doing a lot of work associated with that, but she is a great resource, very insightful and very skilled. Patricia Raybon, another person who started as a journalist, has written a variety of different types of books. She does consulting, teaching, coaching. The memoir analysis service that I mentioned before is provided by Patricia. Just a lovely, wonderful person, very skilled in a variety of different areas, and just a pleasure to work with. And similarly, Margot Starbuck. Again, a veteran in the industry at this point, even though she's not that old. But she has published 7 Christian living books. She does a variety of different types of consulting and editing and ghostwriting. So I've been very, very fortunate to have met these people, got to work with these people, partnered with them. And the final resource is an organization, not an individual. This is called organization called Paraclete Multimedia, and they're a division of Paraclete Press, which is a publishing house, but Paraclete Multimedia operates semi-autonomously, meaning that they hire their services out to anyone else. You don't have to have your book published by Paraclete Press. One of the clients that I have, we did a self-published book, and we had Paraclete do the book cover design and the interior design. And I just think that they did a wonderful job, very cost effective. When it says a team of designers dedicated to your success, that's really the way that they operate. And just, again, a wonderful group of people to work with. So the goal of Writing for Your Life is to serve as a go-to resource for you for anything to do with spiritual writing. So let us know how we can help you. Let us know what types of things that you would like to see from us. I mentioned a webinar series that's coming up in September. Just to give you a brief preview beyond that, there will be additional webinar series this fall. In October, we'll have a webinar series on writing fiction. In November, we'll have a webinar series that will be Meet the Editors. So it'll be similar to the Meet the Agents webinar series that I mentioned in September, but in this case, it'll be editors from publishing houses. And again, what they'll be talking about is how do you work with their companies? What are they looking for? Things like that. Now, in terms of in-person writing conferences and workshops, as many of you probably know, we had 2 large conferences this past year. In May was at Western Theological Seminary and Hope College in Holland, Michigan. In July was at Belmont University in Nashville. And in both those instances, we had 2 headline speakers and 10 breakout session speakers who were either lesser known Christian authors or people from the publishing industry. I'm also, in addition to having those types of conferences in 2018, I will also be holding some smaller events that are more like the advanced writers retreat that we have held along with our main conferences. These will be smaller 2-day events that will be more on the order of 20 to 30 people. They will be in different locations. So one of them will be in New Jersey in November, and another will be in the Chicago area in November. So those have not been announced yet. You won't see them on our website yet, but those are 2 different things that I'm working on for this fall, and there will be additional smaller mini workshops like that in 2018. So with all of that, let me open it up to questions. So feel free to type a message into the chat box, and I will try to answer your questions. So Erica says, would you suggest building a professional Facebook page first or a professional blog and website first? I suggest building the blog and website first. Facebook is more of a means to an end. Remember how I was mentioning that Facebook is predominantly a way to attract new fans? Well, you want to have something to attract them to, not just your Facebook page. So I think that focusing on your website first, and your website including a blog, is first priority. And one of the things I would do even before you go public with that is to have a fair amount of blog articles already queued up and ready to go. So at least a couple of months worth of blog articles. And they can be either articles that you've written yourself or guest articles from other people. So so that's my suggestion is, do the blog and website first, and then, Facebook second. Okay, Abby asked if you have any advice on identifying your audience. I want to avoid trying to write for everyone and end up writing for no one. Well, that is a really, really important question, and important thing to think through before you really get started. And I wouldn't think, but I would reverse it a little bit from identifying your audience. I would switch it around a little bit to say you want to identify what the problem is that you're trying to solve. What is the need that you're trying to address? And that will define your audience. So think really, really deeply and carefully about that question of what is the problem you're trying to solve? How are you trying to help people? And, you want to find a place that's relatively narrow, that's not oversaturated already. So I would, advise you to pick a narrow, specific focus. You can always expand from that later on, but that's the first step, and then that defines who your audience is. So Laura asks about using Medium as a platform, and can it replace a blog or website? I would say no. I don't think Medium is a bad place to use as a communications channel, but I would not think of it in terms of replacing your website for a couple of different reasons. For one thing, your website has got a URL that is branded for you. So in my case, I've got writingforyourlife.com. So I want people to know what Writing for Your Life is all about just by the name of the website address. And on your website, you can customize it however you want beyond just a blog. So you can advertise your books. You can advertise your speaking events. You can put up other content from other people that you think is interesting, or links to other things that you think are interesting. You can also keep it in touch with the technology changes. So for instance, when everyone started using phones and tablets to access the internet, there were many websites that were not prepared for that, and they look bad on those kinds of platforms, on those kinds of devices. So I would suggest, take the bull by the horns. Put your destiny in your own control in terms of your own website, and then sure, use Medium as a distribution channel for your content, just like Facebook is a distribution channel for your content. Alex asked, how much can you expect to create your audience? Well, I'm a little bit not sure how to answer that. I think what I was saying a moment ago, it would be my best answer, which is think of in terms of what's the problem you're trying to solve. Those are the people that you're going to end up being able to help. So if instead your audience, or create your audience, you mean more like, are they going to come to you or are you going to go to them? What I've tried to express is the need to reach out. It's no longer if we build it, they will come. You need to get out there and advertise on places like Facebook, or depending upon your audience, Instagram or Twitter or Amazon or Google. You really have to reach out to create your audience, if that's what you're referring to. Karen asks, I've been reluctant to start my own website and blog because it's so hard to build a following. Instead, I'm part of 2 community blogs for whom I write regularly. Do you think this is sufficient? Well, it depends largely on what your long-term goals are. If you want to write a book, if you want to get a book published, then I would say no, it is not sufficient whatsoever. It is maybe a good starting place, but no one's going to really pay attention to you and think you're for real and legitimate and credible unless you have your own website. And it really isn't that difficult to do. If you're not, technology oriented, find someone to help you. I mean, again, I'm not trying to promote my own services, but that is what I do. I help people just get started if that's what they need. I'll build your website for you. I'll get you started on social media and then let you run with it. If you can do it yourself, or if you've got a relative or friend who can do it for you, then fine, by all means, have them do it. But it really is important to, I think, have your own website and blog. And again, a community blog can be a good distribution channel, for your content, but I would not bank on that as being, kind of the end all and be all for your presence, your online presence. So let's see. If there's any other questions, feel free to type them into the box. One of the things I didn't mention is that there are videos that we have for sale on the website from previous webinars. So if you'd like to see Rachel Held Evans, she's done a couple of webinars with me in the past. You can, purchase that. I think it's only like $14.99 to see her presentation. Also, people like book agents or other Christian authors or editors, people from publishing houses. We've got videos from them as well. These are more like hour-long videos, not the short little interview clips that I was mentioning previously. These are more, kind of presentations and Q&A following those presentations. So if there are no other questions, then we'll conclude the webinar. Feel free to contact me by email at any point in time if you've got additional questions. And thank you very much for joining us today.